Welcome to our third lesson on writing. So today we're going to focus on writing the resolution and the ending. Our learning intentions, we're learning how to gradually end a story. Our success criteria to do that is I can achieve shop in my writing, so we always have this. I can use a variety of connectives, so and, but, so, then, however, because. I can include emotion by choosing one of the 4 ending types for my story. And as a chilly challenge, I can include falling action to gradually end my story. So, over the past 2 lessons, the first lesson we focused purely on the background, where we described the main character Fuzzle and the setting in which he lived in, which is the Fruit City. I have been super impressed with the vocabulary that I have read in your stories so far. Many of you are using the power of 3, where you have 3 adjectives in one sentence. It makes that sentence so much more powerful, and it makes it so much easier for me to visualise the character. Many of you have also used similes, which again increases the imagery of the character and the setting and makes your writing a lot more exciting. We also looked at how to use different openers, such as using adverbs like carefully, quickly, opening with a simile, and opening with verbs as well, describing what they are doing. So I've been super impressed with that. The second lesson focused on how to build up to the climax. So rather than jumping straight to the climax, you gradually build up tension. And we looked at doing that by using a mixture of short sentences and long sentences, because short sentences create a sort of feeling of stress and anxiety, where you're thinking, oh, what's going to happen here? The character's really worried and scared. And then we also looked at the climax. So what was the problem? And we brainstormed different ideas for the different types of problems that your character could happen to your character, and then you chose one. And thank you to those who also showed me their brainstorming, so I could see the other options that they'd thought of for the climax. It's absolutely brilliant, so well done. Today's lesson is going to work on the falling action and the resolution. Now remember, we always talk about with our story mountain that broken roller coaster. We don't jump straight down to the ending, we gradually go down, because if you jump straight down to the ending, it can be a little bit boring, because all of a sudden the story's finished. It's a bit like watching a movie and then it just fast forwards to the end and switches off. You're a bit like, what? Wasn't ready for that. What was happening? I want more detail. So that's what we're going to learn about today. So I want you to take this moment to read over your story so far. Now I'm going to have mine on the screen for you to read. I'm not going to read it over again because I did read it last week. And the importance is reading your story. So read over your introduction and your rising action climax just now. So pause the video just now and have a little read over your story. So, as I said, the first part of your introduction, when I marked your writing, I highlighted where you used adjectives and similes and any vocabulary that described what the set character and setting was like. So I've shown my story with an example there. In yellow, I have highlighted the different openers that you use. So many of you used emotion, similes, or adverbs to open up the sentence of the story. Giving a variety of that stops your story from going and then, and then, and then. So that's super good. We then, as I said, looked at different sentence lengths. So the red Orange are the short sentences and the blue colours are the longer sentences. So longer sentences make you feel a bit more like the story's going well and it's a bit more chilled out, there's progress. And the orange and red is a bit like, oh, what's happening? Because they're shorter, blunter sentences. So I'll have given you feedback on that so far. If there's anything that you want to change or work on, then obviously you can do that today as well. But as I said, today we are focusing on the ending. So just to recap, I can achieve shop in my writing. Remember, shop stands for spelling, so always use your tricky words, strategies and your phoneme knowledge to spell a word. It's important that if you're unsure about a word, stop and think, okay? Otherwise, you'll end up just writing down a guess which might be wrong. A guess can sometimes be right, but it's important you take the time to think about it. Otherwise, you put all the learning about your spelling words to waste. So take that time to stop and think about it. Your handwriting, I do advise, just so that we don't get out of practice, for writing, that you write the story on paper if you've got some. I understand some of you might not, so if you have to type, you have to type. But it's super important that we don't forget our handwriting. So your joins, make sure they're on the line, and your size as well. Order, we don't need to worry about order too much because I've helped you order your story by making sure that we're doing an introduction, an opening, building up to the climax, and then today's lesson going down to the resolution. So that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But just make sure that your sentences aren't jumping about too much, like 1 minute you're talking about your character out cycling and then the next minute they're in space. Okay, so that can be a bit, oh, what's going on? So make sure your order makes sense. And then punctuation, capital letters, full stops, always, always, always. And are there sentences where there's questions, where you need to put a question mark? Is there anything that you need to put an exclamation mark for? And if you're using speech marks, think about the lessons we've done on speech marks to make sure that you're using them properly. Remember, only put them around the part that's actually being spoken. Put a comma on the inside of the speech marks and then said or replied, Bob, whoever, full stop. Okay? Right. So just to recap, we always use VCOP to up-level our writing. That stands for vocabulary, connectives, openers and punctuation. And today's lesson is we focus on vocabulary in the first lesson as well as openers. We've done quite a few lessons in grammar for punctuation. So today we are going to focus on connectives. So I'm going to show you a sentence and all I want you to do is to identify the connectives. Remember, a connective is a word which connects two parts of a sentence together. Suddenly the door creaked open and there was a sudden thud. Tell me what the connective is. It was and. Find the connective in this sentence. The next morning was very sunny but very cold. Which one is the connective? But. The lost boy was so scared so he dashed back to the car. Which word is the connective? So. The hills shone in the background because they were so magical. Which word is the connective? Oh, because. Now, the next one, I want you to add the connective. So I've got two sentences here. Remember, a connective can connect two sentences together to make one sentence. So, first of all, where would you put the connective and which connective would you use? Well, I'll help you out about where to put it. Finally, we reach the end of the trail. So replace that full stop with a connective and then make it a lowercase w for we. Which connective would you use? So one that works really well is finally we reached the end of the trail. Then we realised something very interesting. You could also have had, but we realised something very interesting. Suddenly we realised something very interesting. What about this one? We were so relieved to be home. Something just did not feel right. So what connective could you replace the first full stop with? We were so relieved to be home, however, something just did not feel right. Again, you could have used but. They're probably the two that work best with that sentence. And I think this is the last one. At school we had maths. Maths is my least favourite subject. So what connective could you replace the first full stop with? At school we had maths, but maths is my least favourite subject. You could have maybe also have used however. So these are the connectives you can use in your story, and it's really important you use a variety of connectives because otherwise you'll constantly use and. And is the most common connective to use. It's the most easiest one to use. It will come naturally to you. But it makes a very boring story if we keep using and. So try to challenge yourself today to use then, but, because, so, or however. There are other connectives as well, such as while, and various other ones which I can post for you to use on Teams. So we're now going to look at different ending types. Now, each ending type has different emotions that happen within it. So if we go back to thinking about Cinderella, I want you to think about, how does Cinderella end? Is it a happy ending? Is it a sad ending? Is it a strange ending? Pause this video now and have a little think. So it's a happily ever after ending, like most Disney films, to be fair. It's a classic feel-good ending. Disney is the master at this. Every character meets their goals, so whether there was a villain that they met halfway through the story in the climax, or they got stuck, or they got lost, there was a fight, they tend to always win the fight or find their way out and reach their goals. So it means the reader finishes the story feeling like they can accomplish anything. They feel really good after it. And this sort of ending goes along best with fairy tales and most children's stories because it's light and happy. You don't want to write, if you're going to write a happily ever after ending, you don't want to write a depressing plot only to then wrap it up at the last chapter because it won't make sense. So if you're going to choose a happily ever after ending, you want it to be quite sure, you want the story to be quite obvious that it's going to end quite nicely and not have a sudden change. So vocabulary you could use as well to explain how the character is feeling is amused, delighted, glad, pleased, charmed, grateful, optimistic, content, joyful, enthusiastic, loving. And you don't always have to be explicit with showing the characters feeling happy. You could talk about maybe they had a huge smile beaming across their face, or their tummy felt all warm and fuzzy. And that indicates that the character's happy. So you don't have to necessarily specify that the character's happy. Now this part of this movie still upsets me to this day. I struggle to watch it. This is Toy Story 3. So if you haven't seen it, at this point in the story, the toys had got taken to the junk yard, to the tip, and they were going through the machine which basically burns everything and mushes it all together. So it was like the end of the journey for the toys, and in the film you're thinking, no, this can't be it, this can't be the end of Toy Story. So think about what type of ending that is. It's the tragic ending. Now, luckily the film didn't actually finish like that, it was all good, but if it had, it would have definitely been a tragic ending. So the main goal doesn't go as planned. There are curveballs thrown in. There's more tragedy as you go down your plot mountain. And they don't achieve their goals. So if you're planning to have an unhappy ending, you'll need to show that that's going to happen. What I mean by that is there'll be rubbish things that happen along the way as you come back down the story mountain from your climax. Your climax is going to be a bit of well, you've written your climax, and it's likely to be quite a big problem that they are going to struggle to solve. And as you go down your story mountain, you're going to show that it's really not working out for the character. It doesn't look good, so that it doesn't come as a complete shock when you get to the end. But remember the kind of little happy moments throughout the story, so to keep the reader going, because if you make it depressing the whole way down, then it might just make the reader feel a bit rubbish. So this is a harder one to end with, to be honest, because it's not the nicest one. But if you choose to do so, you always can. So words for sad could be desperate, heavy, crushed, disgusted, upset, weepy. And again, you don't have to use these explicit vocabulary words, emotion words, sorry. You can describe how the character looks like. It seemed like the world was on their shoulders. They were slumped. They felt empty. The tears fell from their face. That indicates the emotion they're feeling without having to actually say it. Now, I couldn't really think of a film for this one, but if we just look at the dog's face, what kind of emotion do you think they are feeling? So the ambiguous ending means it's essentially a cliffhanger where you're not quite sure how it ended. You're really not sure what happened. It's a simple plot is best because it focuses most on the characters, leaving a lot up to the reader's imagination when it comes to what happens after the story is finished. So you could end it with something like, and then suddenly the worst thing happened. Just end it there. Nobody needs to know what that is. Or did they make it? I don't know. So the reader is as a reader, it's quite frustrating. I hate it when you watch films and you don't actually know what happened. And you have a suspicion that it's probably because there's going to be a sequel and you have to wait like a whole year to find out. But some people like that. So if you want to give that kind of ending, then go for it. So if you decide to go with this ending, remember that there's a huge difference between ambiguity and unfinished business. So you don't want to drop the plot too suddenly. So you're in the middle of reading and they're maybe, I don't know, in the middle of a fight with some villain, and then all of a sudden it just says, and then they ran away. You don't want to drop it off just like that. You want to give a few hints about what's happened. And then we have, now if we think about The Lion King, what happens in The Lion King? Well, he obviously at the beginning he loses his dad, and then he ends up having to run away from home because of his uncle. He meets Nala and they do live happily ever after, but it's a bit of a bittersweet ending because not everything in the film went to plan, and obviously he lost his dad. So a bittersweet ending is where there's a mix of emotions. So the conclusion might look like, the ending might look like the character is failing to meet their goal, but something else good happened along the way. So it's not all bad. They did find happiness in the end, but something rubbish had to happen as a result of that. So you make the ending a bit unexpected but hopeful, where you think, you know what, this character is going to be all right despite what they've gone through. And there's a sense of calm and satisfaction at the end. So those are your four, I'm just going to quickly go over them again, the four types of endings you can use. You can use the happily ever after, the tragic sad ending, the cliffhanger, or the bittersweet ending. So just like we did in the last lesson, your next step is to brainstorm your ending. So what type of ending would you like to do? Now you might not have to take this step if something has already came to you. We're like, yep, I know that's how I want to end my story. But if you're struggling with ideas, then it's a good idea to do a little brainstorm. So I've done this here with my story. So happily ever after would be that Fuzzle found the poison that was leaking and killing all the trees. He managed to turn off the leak, and gradually the trees started coming back to life. And then a sad ending was there was no way for the trees to survive. They would have to move to another city. That's a bit rubbish. Fuzzle found some seeds and began planting trees around the city. They started to sprout, but did they survive? So that's the cliffhanger ending. And the bittersweet is that Fuzzle finds out the only way to get the trees back is to stop cycling. So he manages to get his trees back, but he has to give up his passion of cycling. So that's a bit rubbish. Bittersweet there. So again, if you're struggling for ideas, please feel free to steal mine if you like them. They're not all great, but it's just the first things that popped in my head. Or do your own brainstorming. Then step 2 is to choose your best ending. So I have gone with, I want to do the happily ever after because I just like stories to end quite nice. So you choose which ending you are going to do. So I want you to pause this video now to make sure you've done step 1 and 2, or just so that you basically know what ending you are doing. So step 3, I've reversed. Last week we did the steps up to the climax. Today we are doing steps down to the ending to resolve our problem. So just like last week, to ensure that your story is not going to go zoom right down to the bottom, you want to gradually build it down. So this is what I've gone for. Fuzzle and Buzz go round all the trees in the city to see if any are still surviving. They notice that they are all in the same condition with the same colour and the strange liquid dripping from them. Then they notice the same liquid on the ground and follow the trail to a door which is locked. They also notice a strange smell getting stronger as they get closer to the door. Buzz waits at the door whilst Fuzzle cycles to find something to open the door. Buzz starts to get worried as it's getting dark and Fuzzle still isn't back. Oh, what's going to happen? Eventually Fuzzle returns with a hammer, barges open the door. They discover poison is leaking from a factory under the ground and killing the roots of the trees. They turn it off and suddenly, and that's cut off there, there's a big flash and all the trees end up coming back to life. So they all live happily ever after. So remember, these are just notes to help me plan my story. So pause this video now and plan the steps to the end of your story. So remember the last 2 lessons, we got to the climax. We are now at falling action and resolution. So here is my ending, and I have highlighted anything that indicates emotion, and I have highlighted in pink, and in green I have highlighted my connectives. So make sure when you put your writing piece together using your notes that you're still putting a little bit of emotion in there and you are adding connectives. Now, some of you may find it far too tricky to write a big long ending, okay? So 1 paragraph about this size would be enough if you're going to struggle with that, okay? Just try and put at least 1 emotion word and a few connectives, and that will definitely be good enough for you to practice your writing today. Those that want to take it a step further, write a little bit more so you're gradually ending your story, and yeah, so I will show you mine to help you think about how you're going to put yours together and how I used connectives and emotion words. So remember my story, they'd noticed all the trees had died, they hadn't eaten for days, and they don't know why this has happened. So, exhausted, worried and scared, Fuzzle and Buzz lay by the dying banana tree whilst they discussed what to do next. Thankfully, a good suggestion entered Fuzzle's head. However, he felt doubtful, as he wasn't sure if it would be successful. We will go around the entire city and see if there are any clues on the trees to see why this is happening. Quickly, they got onto their bike and rode round the city looking for clues. So as you can see, this is the first step of coming out into my ending. I'm not giving everything away at once. We're still not sure if they're going to solve their problem. They inspected every tree all the same. All the same, but one very distinct similarity. They all had this algae green colour with a strange chemical smell. I just don't know what could have possibly have caused this, wailed Buzz. They lay on the ground exhausted because it had now been days since they had had a proper meal. As they gazed at the grey sky, Fuzzle looked at the tree in a trance. Something caught his eye, so he got up and had a closer look. It was dripping, gooey liquid seeping out of the tree. Quickly he ran to the others and found the same. What could it be, though? Pondered Buzz, as he stared at the ground. Then he noticed something, a trail. His heart was racing. This could be it. They followed the trail of gooiness so they could find out where it was coming from. After an hour's walk, they arrived at a sealed door. Fuzzle left Buzz as it was going to be impossible to open without a tool. 3 hours later, the sky was darkening, and Buzz was worrying. Fuzzle still wasn't back. Then suddenly he heard the rumbling of his bike. It was him. He had a hammer and they began bashing the door down. The smell almost knocked them over. It was the smell from the seeping trees, but stronger. Poison from the factory. It was seeping into the ground and killing the trees. Someone must have left it on. Together with all the strength they had left, they turned it off. There was a huge flash. They quickly ran outside so they could see what was happening. They couldn't believe what they saw. They were back. They were all back. The trees looked glorious than ever because they had more fruit. Their smiles beamed across their faces. They were ecstatic. Fuzzle and Buzz scoffed at almost half a tree worth of fruit, then fell asleep as dusk fell. A sleep and feast, however, I think they definitely earned. So you can see here that I didn't just jump straight to the fact that they got rid of the poison, and I've used a mix of connectives and because, though, then, however, and sometimes I've put emotion words like worrying, ecstatic, and other times I've put things that indicate it, like their smiles beamed across their faces. So I've also put up a help sheet with a list of the connectives, a list of emotion words, and then I've also put 3 steps. So if you just wanted to focus on a short ending with 3 steps that I've given you sentence starters for. So all you would have to do is finish those sentences and add another sentence to each one, and there's your ending. So our learning intentions, we were learning how to gradually end a story. I hope that you managed to achieve shop in your writing, that you used a variety of connectives. If you wanted to challenge yourself a little bit further, include emotion by choosing one of the 4 ending types. And the biggest challenge of all is to gradually have falling action. And that would mean your story is a bit longer, the ending was a bit longer. So that is the end of your story, and I cannot wait to read them all.